Now, what if I told you that a flying saucer built by the military, a wingless bathtub, and a pregnant metallic whale actually conquered the skies? Forget everything you know about aerodynamics. During the Cold War and the space race, desperate engineers slapped jet engines onto farm tractors and hollowed out barrels to solve impossible historical problems. Today, we expose 10 of the most shocking and bizarre aircraft ever built. Hit that subscribe button and stay until the very end. Look at this. Our number one spot is a monstrous machine so gargantuan, it literally swallowed rockets whole. Kicking off our countdown at number 10 is the Edgley Optica, an aircraft that first took flight in the United Kingdom in 1979. Engineered by John Edgley, this machine completely abandoned traditional design elements to achieve a very specific mission. Let us look at the performance check. Powered by a Lycoming IO 540 engine pushing 260 horsepower, the Optica could cruise efficiently at 81 miles per hour. Even more impressive to aviation purists, its stall speed was an incredibly low 58 miles per hour. This made it practically hover. Visually, it looks less like a plane and more like a mechanical dragonfly bolted to a giant fan. Earning the nickname the Bug Eye among aviation circles, its fully glazed bulbous cockpit sits entirely forward of the engine. This gives the pilot an unobstructed 270-degree panoramic view of the ground below. Instead of a traditional propeller, it utilizes a ducted fan tucked inside a distinctive twin-boom tail. Its primary real-world application was low-speed observation work. It functioned almost like a fixed-wing helicopter that could patrol pipelines or forests for hours on a fraction of the fuel. Despite its brilliance, the Optica is a prime example of a forgotten genius in engineering. However, a tragic, completely unexplained crash during a police demonstration in 1985 severely damaged the aircraft's reputation. Massive commercial success sadly slipped through the cracks. It remains one of the most brilliant yet tragically underappreciated observation platforms ever built. But if you think a bug-eyed observation plane is an unusual sight to behold, just wait until you see a machine. It did not even bother having any wings at all. Coming in at number 9 is the NASA M2F1, born in the early 1960s, right during the absolute height of the American space race. This unpowered, wingless aircraft was the very first of NASA's revolutionary lifting body designs. Let us clear the air on its technical specs. It had no engine of its own. That is right. To get airborne, it had to be towed by a heavily modified Pontiac Catalina convertible hot rod. It dragged it across the dry lake beds of California at 120 miles per hour just to get it a few feet off the ground. Affectionately known by test pilots and top aerospace engineers as the Flying Tub, it was essentially a massive wooden half-cone, completely stripped of conventional wings. It relied entirely on the specific aerodynamic shape of its fuselage to aggressively push the air down and generate lift. It was a radical concept built to test real-world applications of re-entry. NASA needed to figure out how a returning spacecraft could survive, falling through the Earth's atmosphere, and land horizontally safely on a runway, rather than splashing down violently into the ocean under a parachute. From the pilot's perspective, flying the M2F1 was accurately described as a terrifying, controlled freefall. Legendary test pilot Milt Thompson famously remarked that operating it was exactly like flying a brick with fins. Its lift-to-drag ratio was so incredibly poor that it dropped like a heavy rock the moment it was released from the tow plane. Absolute madness. Yet this bizarre tub proved the theory worked, directly paving the way for the space shuttle. But if a wingless glider seems crazy, the next aircraft combined two completely contradictory eras into one beast. At number 8, we have the PZL M15 Belphegor, a machine so monumentally ugly and conceptually confused, it was actually named after a mythological demon. Built in Poland during the 1970s, specifically to serve the agricultural demands of the Soviet Union, the M15 holds a bizarre historical title, It is the world's only jet-powered biplane. Look at this. Under the hood, engineers bolted an AI-25 turbofan engine onto it. This severely limited its top speed to a crawling 120 miles per hour due to extreme unavoidable aerodynamic drag. Visually, it is an absolute chaotic mess of engineering. It features massive drag-inducing biplane wings and giant chemical hoppers wedged awkwardly between them, and a screaming jet engine mounted high on top of the fuselage. It looks exactly like a heavy crop duster that violently collided with a Cold War-era fighter jet. Its real-world application was supposed to be spraying massive collective Soviet farms with immense efficiency. The aim was to completely replace the older, slower piston engine aircraft that dominated the massive Eastern Bloc agricultural skies. However, let us completely shatter the myth of its so-called modern efficiency. The reality was an absolute economic disaster. Sadly, the screaming jet engine consumed fuel at nearly 3 to 4 times the rate of a standard traditional piston engine. Farmers on the ground were deafened by a roaring jet. It was attached to a massive metal rig that barely moved faster than a heavy tractor. Only 175 units were built before the Soviets quickly pulled the plug. If you think strapping a jet to a biplane is bad, wait until you see a hollowed-out airliner. Entering the countdown. At number 7 is the Vought XC-142, an American military project from 1964 aimed at creating the ultimate troop transport, unlike conventional aircraft. This machine was designed to combine the heavy payload of a cargo plane with the vertical takeoff capability of a helicopter. Now looking at the specs, it was powered by 4 massive General Electric T-64 turboshaft engines, each producing over 3,000 horsepower, allowing for a blistering top speed of 400 miles per hour. Visually, its design aggressively defies all limits of imagination. The entire massive wingspan, along with all 4 propellers and engines, could physically tilt backward into the sky at a 100-degree angle. When preparing to hover, it looked exactly like a standard cargo plane that had its wings snapped and pointed straight at the clouds. In reality, its application was rapidly deploying 32 fully armed troops, or 8,000 pounds of heavy cargo, directly into rugged jungles or aircraft carriers without needing a runway. However, let us completely shatter the engineering myth. This tilt-wing system was an absolute mechanical nightmare to ensure safety. All 4 engines were physically linked by an incredibly complex cross-shafting system running through the entire wing. As a result, the machine vibrated violently, creating massive bending forces that literally caused it to shake itself apart during test flights. Fatal crashes ultimately killed the project. But its mechanical audacity directly paved the way for the modern V-22 Osprey. Finally, if a plane bending its wings is not terrifying enough, the next machine throws wings into the trash entirely. Slamming hard into the number 6 spot is the Snecma Coléoptère, a terrifying French experimental aircraft from 1959. It threw conventional wings entirely into the trash. The French military wanted a radical machine capable of taking off without long, vulnerable runways. Built strictly as a prototype, its technical specifications were incredibly aggressive. It utilized a single Snecma turbojet engine, pumping out an immense 7,700 pounds of raw thrust. It was designed purely to blast this heavy metallic tube straight up into the sky like an artillery shell. The Coléoptère, meaning beetle in French, featured a completely radical annular wing. This is essentially a massive hollow cylinder surrounding the entire rear of the fuselage. Sitting vertically straight up on its tail landing gear, it looked exactly like a science fiction rocket, with a tiny pilot cockpit bolted onto the tip. Its real-world application was to master vertical takeoff and landing, or VTOL. The theory was that the annular wing would act as an ultra-efficient ramjet at supersonic speeds during high-altitude combat interception. Now, let us brutally shatter an engineering myth right now. VTOL with a hollow tube is borderline suicidal. Absolutely. At low speeds, the wing provided absolutely zero lift. Test pilot Auguste Morel had to back this screaming rocket down to the ground, completely blind. During its 9th test flight, it lost control, wildly oscillating before plummeting. Morel ejected just in time, surviving with severe spinal injuries, but the catastrophic crash instantly, permanently ended the project. Now, let us move from a flying tube to a massive shadow that completely erased the fuselage entirely. At number 5 sits the Northrop YB-49, an awe-inspiring giant, known simply in military circles as the Wing. Developed right after World War II, this stealthy aircraft was the brilliant brainchild of Jack Northrop. His radical engineering philosophy was simple: anything on a plane that wasn't a wing was just wasted aerodynamic drag. Spanning a massive 172 feet of perfectly smooth, unbroken metal, the YB-49 was powered by 8 jet engines, completely buried directly inside the trailing edge, giving it incredible theoretical speed and range. Looking at it from the tarmac, it completely lacked a traditional fuselage, engine nacelles, and a tail section. It looked exactly like a sleek silver boomerang capable of dropping heavy nuclear payloads directly onto enemy territory. Its real-world application was to serve as the ultimate low-drag, high-altitude strategic heavy bomber for the United States Air Force. Because it had absolutely no flat vertical surfaces to reflect radar waves back, it was accidentally decades ahead of its time in achieving early radar evasion technology. While its theoretical aerodynamics were totally flawless, the real-world performance check revealed it was terrifyingly unstable. Surprisingly, without a vertical tail fin, the giant wing lacked crucial directional stability. Pilots were physically exhausted just fighting the control yoke to keep the massive wing flying straight in turbulent air. Tragically, this exact pitch instability led to a horrific crash in 1948. The military savagely scrapped the project, but Jack Northrop was vindicated decades later when his exact design was reborn as the B-2 stealth bomber. Next up, a machine resembling a wooden barrel. Rolling straight into number 4 is the Stipa-Caproni, an Italian experimental aircraft from 1932. It literally looks like a vintage cartoon sketch that magically came to life. Engineered by Luigi Stipa, this machine was built specifically to test a highly unconventional aerodynamic theory regarding thrust. Looking closely at its heavily constrained specifications, this aircraft was far from a speed demon. Pushed by a de Havilland Gypsy 3 engine generating only 120 horsepower, its massive drag severely limited its absolute top speed to a miserable 81 miles per hour. Visually, Stipa designed a fuselage that was essentially a fat, hollow wooden tube. He completely mounted the engine and the propeller deep inside it. The pilot and a passenger sat awkwardly in a tandem cockpit, perched right on top of this flying barrel. It strongly resembled a massive airborne vacuum cleaner rather than a serious piece of military aviation hardware. Its real-world application was to prove the principle of a tapered duct. Stipa mathematically theorized that forcing turbulent air through a narrow exhaust tube would significantly increase the engine's overall efficiency. The real-world check here is absolutely fascinating. The Stipa-Caproni was incredibly stable in flight. Amazing. It almost violently refused to stall, and it achieved exactly the thrust efficiency Stipa had calculated. The fatal flaw was simply that the massive wooden barrel created way too much external aerodynamic drag. Though the Italian Air Force laughed it off and scrapped it, his flying barrel laid the fundamental groundwork for the modern turbofan engines, the engines that power every jet airliner today. But as we enter the top 3, we jump from a wooden barrel to a modern aerodynamic monster. Taking the heavy-duty number 3 spot is the massive Airbus Beluga XL, the undisputed king of modern European aviation transport. Based structurally on the Airbus A330 airframe, This machine was purpose-built to haul extreme industrial payloads. The aerodynamic stats on this mechanical beast are completely mind-blowing to witness. Despite aggressively pushing a frontal cargo bay spanning nearly 29 feet in diameter through the sky, the Beluga XL can safely carry 50 tons of massive payload over an incredible distance of 2,500 nautical miles without stopping. Visually, it dominates the tarmac with a massively oversized upper fuselage, a heavily lowered cockpit, and a custom factory paint job featuring a giant, cheerful smile and eyes. It literally looks exactly like a happy beluga whale, casually cruising at 35,000 feet. Its main real-world application is strictly internal logistics for Airbus. It acts as a flying warehouse, rapidly transporting massive, fully constructed aircraft components like full-size commercial airplane wings from various manufacturing plants spread across Europe directly to the final assembly lines in France and Germany. The engineering mythbuster here is how it handles dangerous crosswinds. That massive hump acts exactly like a giant sail in bad weather, desperately trying to flip the plane over. To counteract these immense, violent aerodynamic forces, engineers had to massively enlarge the vertical tail fin and bolt huge auxiliary fins directly to the horizontal stabilizers. Moving millions of dollars of aerospace parts daily, it proves that with enough thrust you can make a flying warehouse graceful. But before Europe built this, the Americans built an even crazier cargo hauler that still flies today. Roaring heavily into number 2 is the legendary aerospace line Super Guppy, the ultimate steroid-injected evolution of the pregnant guppy we saw earlier. First taking to the skies in 1965, the Super Guppy was built to push the absolute physical limits of aerodynamic haulage. The real-world performance of this bloated leviathan is as gritty and mechanical as it gets. Powered by 4 extremely loud Allison T56 turboprop engines, this wide behemoth forcefully cruises through the turbulence at a steady 250 miles per hour, refusing to back down from the wind. Visually, it is so comically bloated, it completely defies all common logic. The internal cargo area measures an insane 25 feet tall and 25 feet wide, making the aircraft look exactly like a massive swollen silver balloon strapped awkwardly to a tiny pair of wings. Its real-world application involves hauling massive spacecraft components to actually load it, the entire front nose of the aircraft, including the entire cockpit, unbolts and physically hinges open sideways up to 110 degrees using pure muscle, allowing it to swallow massive rocket stages entirely whole. Listen to this. Here is the absolute craziest backstage fact. Despite its massive, terrifying size and the immense crosswind drag it brutally endures, the flight controls are completely mechanical, astounding. There are absolutely no modern fly-by-wire computers saving the flight crew. The pilots physically wrestle the heavy yokes and thick steel cables using pure muscle to steer this giant silver forehead through the sky. Incredibly, NASA is still operating the very last Super Guppy right now to support the Artemis moon missions. But as extreme as the Guppy is, our final aircraft completely abandons the concept of planes altogether. Finally, taking the number 1 spot and the absolute climax of aerodynamic defiance is the highly classified Avro Canada VZ9 Avrocar. Yes, that is true. During the height of extreme Cold War paranoia in 1959, the United States military actively funded and physically built a real functioning flying saucer. Spanning exactly 18 feet in diameter, its technical specs relied on a massive central turbo rotor. It brutally sucks air in directly from the top and blasts it out the circular edges, theoretically generating a solid cushion of high-pressure air directly beneath it. Visually, it is undeniably an alien UFO rendered in solid aluminum. There are no wings, no tail, and absolutely no traditional aircraft features. It is just a sleek circular silver disc housing 2 pilots in separate tiny bubble canopies. Its intended real-world application was to act as an aggressive flying cavalry vehicle. The military envisioned a massive fleet of these saucers, hovering low over the rugged battlefield. Completely immune to enemy radar, rivers, and rough terrain, speeding troops in at supersonic speeds, while striking absolute fear into the enemy. However, the Avrocar represents one of the most spectacular whistleblower failures in government spending. Let us break the engineering myth. It suffered from severe hubcap instability. The moment this disc rose more than 3 feet off the tarmac, the ground effect totally broke down, causing the craft to wildly pitch and buck uncontrollably, violently, sadly. Test pilots stated it felt like balancing on a beach ball floating in a turbulent swimming pool. It could not fly high, it could not fly fast. And the government quietly buried the UFO evidence after burning millions of dollars. These machines are not just bizarre visual experiments. They represent the relentless human spirit to push boundaries. They all had one thing in common: real radical engineering solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Which one of these aerodynamic anomalies did you find the strangest? Which one would you want to see in person? And is there a crazy aircraft I missed? Let me know in the comments. Absolutely. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Click the video on screen right now to see the most massive trucks ever built.